The crowd erupted in laughter as Mike Garcia, the school janitor, was pulled onto the wrestling mat. His small frame looked pathetic next to the professional wrestler. Mike's eyes found his son in the crowd, the boy's face twisted in fear. Then, in 3 fluid movements that silenced the room, Mike flipped the champion onto his back. Principal Elise Carter stood, her eyes wide with disbelief at the man she'd walked past 1,000 times without truly seeing. It hadn't always been this way for Mike Garcia. 3 months earlier, his morning routine was a carefully choreographed dance of necessity. In the soft dawn light of their modest 2-bedroom apartment, he moved quietly, making breakfast while checking Jamie's backpack. At 38, Mike's face carried the weathered kindness of someone who had faced life's hardest blows but refused to become bitter. His hands, calloused from years of manual labor, gently shook his 8-year-old son's shoulder. "Time to wake up, buddy," he whispered. His voice carrying the patient tone he'd cultivated since becoming a single father 3 years ago when cancer took his wife Maria. The walls of their small kitchen were covered with Jamie's drawings and schedules, visual aids that helped the boy navigate his day with mild autism. Mike had learned to create routines that gave Jamie security, even when their world had been shattered by loss. "Dad, can I wear my blue shirt today?" Jamie asked, his voice still thick with sleep. Mike smiled, knowing the blue shirt made Jamie feel brave on difficult days. "Already ironed and on your chair, champ." This was their life, small victories, daily challenges, and a love that sustained them both. Across town, in a sleek high-rise apartment, Elise Carter's morning unfolded with military precision. At 42, the new principal of Lincoln High School had built her reputation on efficiency and results. Her tailored suit and perfect chignon broadcast her message before she spoke a word. Excellence was non-negotiable. "Sophia, breakfast is ready," she called, checking her watch. Her 10-year-old daughter appeared, already dressed in her uniform, her expression serious beyond her years. "Mom, don't forget I have piano after school." Elise nodded, mentally rearranging her schedule. Single motherhood and career advancement required constant juggling, but she'd made it work since the divorce 4 years ago. "I've got it covered. Mrs. Peterson will pick you up." What she didn't say was that she'd be working late again, reviewing the disciplinary statistics that had the school board concerned. Lincoln High needed transformation, and Elise was determined to be the one who delivered it, even if it meant less time with Sophia. Success required sacrifice. This was the lesson she taught her daughter daily, both in words and in absence. At Lincoln High, Mike moved through the hallways with practiced invisibility. His gray uniform blended into the background as students rushed past, dropping trash that he would later collect without complaint. In the 3 months since taking the janitor position, he'd mapped the school's rhythms, which doors slammed, which floors scuffed easily, which teachers stayed latest. He took pride in his work, though no one noticed. It allowed him to stay close to Jamie, who attended the elementary school next door, and it paid enough to keep them afloat. As he mopped near the administrative offices, Principal Carter emerged, surrounded by department heads. "The board expects results this quarter," she was saying, her voice crisp with authority. "Our disciplinary issues are undermining our academic standing." Mike kept his head down as they passed, but he listened. He always listened. In another life, before Maria's illness changed everything, he had been someone people listened to, a collegiate wrestling champion who'd once placed 4th in the Olympics. Now, he was just the man who cleaned up messes no one else wanted to touch. Elise barely registered the janitor as she led her team down the hallway. Her mind was occupied with strategies and solutions. Lincoln High's reputation was at stake, and with it, her career trajectory. The board had taken a chance on her, and she couldn't afford to fail. "I want daily reports on the hotspot areas," she instructed. "Any student with repeat offenses needs intervention immediately." As they rounded the corner, a commotion erupted in the cafeteria. A freshman boy was having what appeared to be a panic attack, his breathing erratic as a crowd gathered. Teachers approached uncertainly, their voices adding to the chaos. Elise quickened her pace, mentally preparing to take control of the situation, when something unexpected happened. The janitor, what was his name, was already there, kneeling beside the boy. His voice was low and steady, his instructions simple. "Focus on my hand, buddy. 5 fingers, see? Count with me. 1 breath for each finger." Incredibly, the boy began to calm, his breathing slowing to match the rhythm Mike established. Within minutes, the crisis had passed. Elise found herself staring at the janitor with newfound curiosity as he quietly returned to his mop, avoiding the attention his intervention had created. That night, as Elise reviewed personnel files, she paused at Mike Garcia's sparse employment record. Custodial experience, references from 2 previous schools, A note about his son attending Lincoln Elementary. Nothing remarkable. Yet the way he'd handled that student. It suggested training or experience beyond what was listed. She made a mental note to observe him more closely, then moved on to more pressing matters. The board was pushing for a zero-tolerance disciplinary policy, but something in her gut questioned whether that was the right approach. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia's piano teacher. Her daughter had seemed distracted, withdrawn. Elise sighed, adding another item to her mental list of concerns. Sometimes it felt like she was failing at everything that mattered, succeeding only at things that ultimately didn't. She closed the file, unaware that the unassuming janitor would soon challenge everything she thought she knew about leadership, strength, and what it meant to truly see someone. The crisis at Lincoln High reached its boiling point 6 weeks later. A series of increasingly violent incidents had parents threatening to transfer their children and the school board demanding immediate action. Elise called an emergency meeting in the conference room, gathering administrators and senior faculty. "We need solutions, not excuses," she stated firmly, concealing her own mounting anxiety. Various proposals filled the air. Stricter penalties, security measures, parent accountability programs. Mike was cleaning the conference room windows, his presence so routine it had become invisible to the room's occupants. He listened as each suggestion missed what he saw daily in the hallways. Kids without connection, without the skills to manage conflict or emotion. When the guidance counselor suggested mandatory anger management classes, Mike couldn't help the small sigh that escaped him. Elise, hyper-aware after weeks of subtle observation, caught the sound. "Mr. Garcia? Do you have something to contribute?" The room fell silent, faces turning in surprise toward the window where Mike stood, cloth in hand. For a moment, he hesitated, years of keeping his head down warring with what he knew to be true. "With respect, ma'am," he finally said, his voice quiet but clear, "anger isn't the primary problem. These kids don't know how to feel respected or how to give respect. Without that foundation, no punishment system will work." The director of discipline scoffed. "And you're an expert in adolescent behavior now, janitor?" Elise raised a hand, silencing the remark. "Continue, Mr. Garcia." Mike set down his cleaning supplies. "In my experience, people fight when they feel cornered or invisible. Maybe what these kids need isn't more punishment, but training in how to see each other, how to hold boundaries without violence." The room erupted in dismissive murmurs. Elise studied Mike's face, seeing something there that intrigued her, certainty without arrogance. "Thank you for your input," she said finally. "We'll take it under advisement." As the meeting continued, Mike returned to his windows, knowing his words had likely fallen on deaf ears. He had overstepped, revealed too much of himself. It was a mistake he couldn't afford to make again. That afternoon, chaos erupted on the playground, where Jamie waited for his father. A group of fifth graders had surrounded him, mocking the way he rocked when anxious. "Look at the retard," one boy taunted, pushing Jamie's shoulder. Mike arrived just as his son curled into himself, hands covering his ears. A defensive posture Mike knew all too well. Without raising his voice, Mike stepped into the circle. "Gentlemen," he said calmly, "I'd like you to meet my son, Jamie." His presence alone caused the boys to step back. Instead of threatening or scolding, Mike knelt down. "Jamie has a superpower," he explained. "His brain sees patterns most people miss. That rocking helps him think." "What helps you think clearly when you're stressed?" The question caught the bullies off guard. One boy shrugged awkwardly. "I don't know. Nothing, I guess." Mike nodded thoughtfully. "Learning that is important. Everyone needs tools." He helped Jamie to his feet, maintaining eye contact with the lead boy. "If you're interested in finding yours, I'm here most afternoons." It wasn't a confrontation or a lecture, it was an invitation. The boys dispersed, confused but somehow less hostile. What Mike didn't see was Elise Carter, who had been picking up Sophia, watching the entire interaction from her car with growing fascination. The next day, a knock on the door of the janitor's supply room startled Mike as he inventoried cleaning supplies. Elise Carter stood in the doorway, her usual authoritative presence somehow subdued. "Mr. Garcia, do you have a moment?" He nodded, setting aside his clipboard. "I saw what happened yesterday with your son," she began. "Your approach was unconventional." Mike tensed, preparing for reprimand. "I'm sorry if I overstepped." Elise shook her head. "Actually, I wanted to ask you about what you said in the meeting. About respect and boundaries." She hesitated, then admitted, "Nothing we've tried is working. The suspension rates are climbing, and the violence isn't decreasing." It was the first crack in her perfect facade, a moment of vulnerability that surprised them both. Mike considered his words carefully. "When I was younger, I trained in competitive wrestling. The first thing they teach isn't holds or moves, it's respect for yourself, your opponent, and the mat. Without that foundation, it's just sanctioned fighting. He paused, wondering how much to reveal. I've been watching these corridors for months. These kids are fighting because they don't know how to stand their ground without attacking, how to yield without feeling defeated. Elise studied him with new eyes. And you think you could teach them this? The question hung between them, an unexpected bridge across the chasm of their different worlds. Mike's proposal was simple, a pilot program with 10 of the school's most troubled students, teaching them principles drawn from wrestling and mindfulness practices. Twice weekly, after school, in the small auxiliary gym. No uniforms, no grades, no traditional authority structure. Elise was skeptical, but desperate enough to try anything that might work. 2 weeks, she conceded. If there's no improvement, we go back to the board's recommendations. What neither of them anticipated was how quickly word would spread. By the third session, other students were peering through the gym doors, curious about what made even James Rollins, notorious for his fighting, attend voluntarily. Inside, Mike created a space unlike anything else at Lincoln High. Students learned to stand in their power without dominating others. To yield without shame, to breathe through conflict. Your strength isn't for hurting, he told them repeatedly. It's for holding yourself accountable, holding space for others, holding the line when necessary. On mats worn from years of athletic practices, these kids who had been labeled problems began to find a different identity, one based not on aggression but on control and mutual respect. Meanwhile, in the elementary school next door, an unexpected connection was forming. Sophia Carter, struggling with her parents' divorce and her mother's constant busyness, had retreated into quiet compliance at school and home. During recess, while other children played, she often sat alone with a book. It was Jamie who approached her, drawn by her stillness. "You like dragons too?" he asked, noticing the cover of her fantasy novel. Sophia nodded, surprised by the interruption but not displeased. Jamie sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "My dad says, dragons teach us about courage because they're scary but also magical." His matter-of-fact delivery made Sophia smile. "My mom just says I read too much fantasy." Jamie considered this seriously. Adults forget sometimes. Magic is just science we don't understand yet. It was the beginning of an unlikely friendship between the principal's daughter and the janitor's son, two children navigating loss in different ways, finding common ground in imagination and mutual understanding. When Elise discovered the friendship, her first instinct was concern. She knew little about Jamie beyond his diagnosis, and she worried about Sophia becoming a caretaker rather than a friend. But watching them together changed her perspective. Jamie's straightforward approach seemed to draw Sophia out of her shell, while her patient listening gave him space to express himself without fear of judgment. One afternoon, as rain kept the children indoors for recess, Elise observed them creating an elaborate game with rules only they understood. She was so absorbed in watching their interaction that she didn't notice Mike until he spoke. "They're good for each other," he said quietly, standing beside her with a buffing machine he'd been moving between classrooms. Elise nodded, finding herself unusually comfortable in his presence. "Sophia's been different lately." "Happier." Mike smiled, pride evident in his expression. "Jamie too. He talks about her all the time." An awkward silence followed, both adults uncertain how to bridge the gap between their positions, employer and employee, principal and janitor. Finally, Elise made an impulsive decision. "Would you and Jamie like to come for dinner this Friday? As a thank you for everything." The surprise on Mike's face quickly gave way to a warm smile that transformed his features. "We'd like that very much." The dinner changed everything. In the comfortable space of Elise's apartment, away from the hierarchies of school, they were simply two single parents with bright, complicated children. Mike arrived with homemade enchiladas. "My mother's recipe, food is how we showed love in my family," and a nervous energy that faded as the evening progressed. They discovered shared tastes in music, similar views on education, and the common ground of raising children alone. While the kids played in Sophia's room, their conversation deepened. "How did you end up at Lincoln?" Elise asked, refilling his glass of water. Mike hesitated, then decided on honesty. "After Maria, my wife, died, Jamie needed stability. I needed a job with hours that let me be there for him. My degree and wrestling career didn't exactly translate to the current job market." Elise raised an eyebrow. "Wrestling career?" He shrugged modestly. "College champion. Olympic team briefly. Lifetime ago." Before she could inquire further, the children burst into the room, Jamie clutching something gold that caught the light. "Dad!" Sophia found your medal in my backpack. I forgot I brought it for show and tell. Elise stared at the Olympic medal in Jamie's hand, then at Mike, seeing him truly for the first time. Not just the janitor who cleaned their school, but a man who had once stood among the world's elite athletes. Fourth place, Mike explained with a self-deprecating smile. Not quite glory, but not bad. Jamie passed the medal to Sophia, who examined it with reverence. Dad keeps it in my treasure box because he says I'm his gold medal now. The simple statement caught Elise off guard, touching something deep within her. How often had she told Sophia that achievements defined success? That positions and titles were the measure of a person's worth? Yet here was a man who had reached heights most would envy, now finding his greatest pride in being a good father to his son. Later, after the kids had fallen asleep watching a movie, Elise and Mike sat on her balcony, the night air cool around them. "Why didn't you ever mention your background?" she asked. "It might have opened doors beyond custodial work." Mike gazed at the city lights below. After Maria got sick, priorities shifted. Jamie needed consistency more than I needed recognition. Besides, he added with a gentle smile that reached his eyes, some doors are worth opening, others aren't. I've learned to tell the difference. 2 weeks later, Elise called Mike to her office, expression serious as he entered. "The disciplinary reports are in for your pilot group," she began, sliding a folder across her desk. Mike braced himself, uncertain what to expect. "Incidents are down 70%. Attendance is up. 2 teachers have independently reported improved classroom behavior." Her professional tone couldn't quite mask her amazement. "Whatever you're doing, it's working." The validation should have felt triumphant, but Mike's response was characteristically measured. "It's not me, it's them. They just needed someone to see them as more than their mistakes." Elise leaned forward, decision made. "The board meets next Thursday. I want you to present your program. If approved, we could expand it school-wide." Mike's hesitation was immediate. "I'm not sure that's." "Before you say no," Elise interrupted, "consider this. These principles could help hundreds of students, not just 10. She paused, then added more softly, "Sometimes our greatest impact comes from stepping into spaces that make us uncomfortable." The words seemed directed at herself as much as at him. Mike studied her face, seeing not the intimidating principal but a woman committed to genuine change. "All right," he agreed finally. "But I speak as myself, no academic jargon, no pretense." Elise smiled, relief and something warmer lighting her features. "I wouldn't want it any other way." The board meeting tested everything Mike believed about himself and others. Seated at the long table, surrounded by educators and administrators in business attire, his janitor's uniform felt conspicuously out of place. When invited to speak, however, something shifted. He stood not as an employee seeking approval, but as an advocate for students who needed a different approach. "Respect isn't abstract," he began, his voice finding its strength. "It's concrete, teachable. When these kids enter my classroom," yes, I call it a classroom, though it's just mats on a gym floor, "they leave titles at the door. No troublemakers, no honor students. Just people learning to stand their ground without destroying someone else's." As he described the program's principles and outcomes, skepticism on the board members' faces gradually gave way to interest. The data supported his approach, but it was his authenticity that ultimately persuaded them. When the questioning turned pointed, "What qualifies a janitor to implement behavioral intervention?" Elise intervened. "Mr. Garcia brings Olympic-level athletic training and 3 months of demonstrable results. His position is irrelevant to his capability." Her defense, firm but professional, created a subtle shift in the room's dynamic. By meeting's end, the board had approved an expanded pilot program with additional funding and, significantly, a stipend for Mike as program coordinator. Walking to the parking lot afterward, Elise matched her pace to his. "You were brilliant in there," she said quietly. Mike shook his head, embarrassed by the praise, but undeniably pleased. "I just spoke the truth as I see it." Their hands brushed accidentally as they walked, neither acknowledging the contact nor pulling away. Something was changing between them, a recognition of shared purpose that felt dangerously close to something more personal. The expanded program transformed Lincoln High more quickly than anyone anticipated. Within a month, disciplinary referrals dropped school-wide. Students who had once been adversaries were seen mediating conflicts among younger peers. The atmosphere in hallways and classrooms shifted subtly but unmistakably. Mike maintained his custodial duties, insisting that there was value in continuing the work that kept the school functioning. Besides, he told Elise during one of their now regular coffee meetings after school, "It keeps me grounded. The moment I start thinking I'm too important to clean a toilet is the moment I lose what makes this program work." She laughed, appreciating his perspective while still pushing him to recognize his contributions. Their professional relationship had developed an undercurrent of personal connection that neither acknowledged directly but both increasingly valued. Small gestures accumulated, a coffee left on his cleaning cart, supplies ordered for his program without his having to ask, his making minor repairs in her office before she even noticed things needed fixing. They were building something together, not just a program but a mutual trust that felt increasingly essential to them both. As the school year progressed, so did their children's friendship. Jamie and Sophia became inseparable, their different challenges complementing rather than dividing them. When Jamie became overwhelmed by sensory input, Sophia created quiet spaces for him. When Sophia struggled with math concepts, Jamie's pattern recognition abilities helped make them clear. Their parents watched with a mixture of joy and trepidation, aware that their own evolving relationship would inevitably impact their children. They're creating their own family, Elise observed one afternoon as they watched the children collaborate on a science project. The word family hung between them, laden with implication. Mike nodded, choosing his response carefully. Kids are smarter than we give them credit for. They build what they need. His eyes met hers briefly, long enough for understanding to pass between them. They were both circling something neither was quite ready to name. The moment was interrupted by Sophia's excited call. "Mom! Mike! Come see what we made." Just Mike, not Mr. Garcia. The boundaries were blurring everywhere. The wrestling demonstration was the board's idea, a showcase of the program's principles for parents and community members. Professional wrestlers would demonstrate techniques, then work with student participants. No one anticipated how it would become a turning point. The gymnasium was packed, energy high as the exhibition began. From her seat in the front row, Elise watched with pride as students from Mike's program demonstrated the respect rituals that began each session. The lead wrestler, a regional champion named Scott Reynolds, took the microphone after the demonstrations. "Now we need a volunteer from the audience, someone who's never wrestled before." His eyes scanned the crowd, then landed on Mike, who was adjusting mats at the edge of the performance area. "How about our janitor friend here? Let's see how he handles himself against a pro." The crowd laughed as Mike was pulled into the center. Elise tensed, seeing the trap. This wasn't a genuine demonstration, but entertainment at Mike's expense. Before she could intervene, Jamie's voice cut through the gymnasium. "That's my dad. He's the best wrestler ever." The moment hung suspended, a child's faith against a crowd's amusement. Mike's eyes found his son, then shifted to Elise. She saw in his expression, not embarrassment, but a quiet determination. When Reynolds moved toward him with theatrical aggression, Mike's transformation was instant. His stance shifted, his center lowered, his presence expanded. The professional wrestler lunged, expecting an easy takedown. Instead, he found himself expertly countered, his momentum used against him. In one fluid sequence that spoke of thousands of hours of training, Mike executed a perfect throw that left Reynolds flat on his back, the crowd gasping in collective shock. For 3 seconds, the gymnasium was utterly silent. Then Jamie's whoop of triumph broke the spell, and applause erupted, hesitant at first, then building to a roar. Mike helped Reynolds to his feet, the professional's expression a mixture of surprise and newfound respect. "Olympic team, 2008, Mike said quietly, just between them. "No hard feelings." As he stepped back from the mat, his eyes found Elise, who had risen to her feet. Her face held wonder, pride, and something more personal that made his heart race faster than any competition ever had. The aftermath of the demonstration changed everything. Reynolds, rather than being humiliated, became an enthusiastic advocate for the program, volunteering his time for future training sessions. Students who had viewed Mike with indifference now approached him with questions, respect evident in their manner. The board, impressed by the community response, approved funding for a full-time position, student wellness coordinator, with Mike as the obvious candidate. The offer letter sat on his desk for 3 days, while he considered what acceptance would mean. The salary would change their lives, allowing him to move Jamie to a better apartment, start a college fund, perhaps even take a vacation. But the visibility, the expectations, the fundamental shift in identity from the man who cleaned up messes to the man responsible for shaping policy, these gave him pause. On the 4th day, Elise found him in the boiler room, fixing a valve that had been leaking. "You haven't responded to the offer," she said, her tone carefully neutral. Mike tightened a fitting before answering. "I'm not sure I'm the right person." Elise leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Because you're a janitor?" The directness of the question made him look up. "Partly. And because change isn't always better." Elise considered him thoughtfully. "When I first came to Lincoln, I had a 5-year plan. Fix the school, advance my career, move to district administration. She smiled ruefully. Now I'm considering staying indefinitely. Do you know why? Mike set down his wrench, giving her his full attention. The program you've built reminds me why I became an educator in the first place. Not for metrics or advancement, but to help young people become their best selves. She stepped closer, professional distance yielding to personal truth. You don't have to stop being who you are to step into what you could be, Mike. Sometimes they're the same thing seen from a different angle. Her words penetrated defenses he hadn't realized he'd built. Later that day, he signed the acceptance letter, feeling not like he was leaving something behind but like he was finally reclaiming something essential that had been set aside during the hard years of loss and survival. When he told Jamie about the new position over dinner, his son's response was characteristically direct. Does this mean you won't clean the school anymore? Mike considered how to explain the complexity of the transition. I'll be doing different work, but with the same purpose, making the school better for everyone. Jamie nodded, processing this. Will you still wear your uniform? I like your uniform. The question brought unexpected emotion to Mike's throat. Maybe sometimes, but probably new clothes most days. Jamie was quiet for a moment, then brightened. Can we get ice cream to celebrate? Mike laughed, grateful for his son's simple wisdom. Some changes mattered, others didn't. The important things remained constant. The morning after the board's announcement of his new position, Mike rose earlier than usual. The apartment was quiet, Jamie still sleeping soundly. He made coffee, then stood at the small kitchen window, watching dawn lighten the sky. This day would be different from all the days that had come before, not because of the title or the office being prepared for him, but because he was stepping fully into a truth he had hidden for too long. He was more than his losses, more than the limitations he had accepted in the name of security. As he contemplated this threshold between past and future, a gentle knock at the door surprised him. Opening it, he found Elise and Sophia, a bakery box in Elise's hands. We thought you might like breakfast, she said, a hint of uncertainty in her usually confident manner. Celebration seems to require pastries. Mike smiled, touched by the gesture and by what it represented. Not just professional acknowledgement but personal connection. Perfect timing. Coffee's just ready. He stepped back, inviting them into the small apartment that suddenly seemed brighter, more welcoming than it had moments before. Around the kitchen table, the four of them created a picture that would have seemed impossible months earlier. The principal and the janitor, the autism spectrum boy and the quiet girl, sharing food and conversation as if they belonged together. Jamie excitedly told Sophia about the new program his dad would be running. While Elise and Mike exchanged glances over their coffee cups, communication passing between them without words. When it was time to leave for school, they walked together, the children running ahead, engaged in an elaborate game of their own invention. At the entrance to Lincoln High, they paused. The building looked different somehow, not just a workplace but a community they were building together. Ready for your first day, Wellness Coordinator Garcia? Elise asked. Professional tone belied by the warmth in her eyes. Mike nodded, feeling a certainty that had nothing to do with titles or positions. Ready, Principal Carter. Their hands brushed again, this time intentionally, fingers lingering in brief contact. No declarations were necessary, no promises made. They were finding their way towards something that neither had expected but both now recognized as possibility, a shared future built on respect, understanding, and the courage to be seen truly. Inside the school, students greeted Mike differently, some with congratulations, others with the same respectful nod he had taught in his program. He made his way to his new office, a converted storage room that maintenance had painted over the weekend. Before stepping inside, however, he noticed a spill on the hallway floor. Juice from someone's breakfast. Already attracting dirt from passing shoes. Without hesitation, he retrieved a mop from the nearby custodial closet and cleaned the spill himself. A passing student observed with confusion. Aren't you, like, management now, Mr. Garcia? Mike smiled, returning the mop to its place. Titles change. Values don't. We all take care of what needs caring for. It was the principle that would define his leadership, service before status, action before words, seeing the worth in work others overlooked. Later that afternoon, looking out his office window, he watched as Jamie and Sophia played together on the school grounds. Elise joined him, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. They make it look so easy, don't they? She said softly. Finding each other. Building something new. Mike turned to her, years of caution giving way to honest emotion. Maybe we could learn from them. Elise smiled, the professional mask completely set aside. I think we already are. As their children called for them to join their game, they stepped outside together, moving toward a future neither had imagined, but both now welcomed. One where past identities weren't erased, but incorporated into something richer, where wounds became wisdom, and where being truly seen was the greatest gift of all.